All right, welcome everyone to our afternoon study session. Guess we'll say the whole thing. I should probably do that. Okay, so today is Friday, March 29th, and the time is 12:32 p.m. We're convened as the Provo City School Board of Education, meeting at 1591 North Jordan Avenue in Provo, Utah, and we'll begin with a roll call. Jennifer Partridge, Board Vice President.
Gina Hales, board member. Melanie Hall, board member.
Lisa Boyce, board member.
Will Widener, student member.
Max Joyner, student member.
Jared Seitz, district office.
Jason Cox, human resources.
Daryl Jensen, secondary ed.
Yeah.
Terry McCabe, board member.
Meg Van Wagenen, board member.
I was trying to figure out who I was. Devin Daly, business administrator.
Wendy Dow, superintendent.
All right. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to our other people in the room here with us today. Good to have you here. And do I have a motion to start our study session?
I move we begin our study session.
Okay, motion made by Board Member Van Wagenen. Do we have a second? Second by Board Member Hales. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are now in study session. And we are going to turn it over to Wendy to introduce this exciting topic that's going to keep us awake after lunch.
I know, we purposefully put this topic after lunch because we thought everyone would start falling asleep, but I think cell phones might be exciting. So, as we've gone around and done, well, I'll say, as I've gone around and done listening tours, especially at the secondary schools, I don't hear this as much at the elementary schools, but one of the issues that comes up is the use of cell phones. And teachers are very aware that Governor Cox sent a letter to basically all educators, but primarily to school boards and principals and superintendents about encouraging us to not only have a policy, but to actually make that policy somewhat restrictive of the use of cell phones in schools, that they're creating a distraction for students, and also kind of tied to the harms associated with social media. So I just thought it would be a good idea to have a conversation about, do we want to pursue having a district-wide policy about cell phones? Our schools do have, some of our schools do have specific policies. The only real policy that we have as a district for cell phones is about if you're using it inappropriately. So this would be for things like sexting, or it's inappropriate use of technology. So say a teacher says, please don't have a cell phone, and the student refuses to put it away, then you can have a cell phone violation as a result of that. And it does allow us to take disciplinary action towards students for violating those individual policies. But the feedback from some teachers is that they would like something that's more systemic, and they really want to know, I think the bottom line is they really want to know what the board is willing to support in terms of what their policies and practices are. I also want you to know that there is a lot of disagreement even amongst educators about phones, because there are some educators that manage it fine. They don't want somebody else telling them how to do it. There are some teachers that allow kids to, say, listen to music, for example, while they're doing art or something like that. And there are other teachers that absolutely want a very prescribed policy of what that looks like, when they can take it away, and all of those kinds of things. So we're just kind of talking about today, do we want to pursue a district-wide policy? What is the stomach for that? Do we feel like we would have constituent support for that kind of thing? We know that students probably have a very different view about this than adults do. And the enforcement really becomes an issue too. How much time starts to be taken up by teachers and by administrators And is that really the best use of our time, or are there better ways to do that? So I just want to open it up for discussion with the goal of giving us some direction of, are we going to send this to policy committee to create a policy, and being very mindful that the governor has asked us to respond to cell phones. So I don't think it's an option of just ignoring it and moving forward. We do need to decide how we want to support our students and our teachers so that they have an engaging learning environment free from distractions.
All right, thoughts? Microphone,
Oh,
please.
yeah. I remember reading an article, and it basically said the policy came from the students, and I was thinking, if we don't include students in creating the policy, implementing the policy will probably be really difficult. What do you guys think?
You are correct.
So Will and I, we've actually talked a lot about this with our district student council.
Student Advisory
Yes.
Council, is that what we're
Student
calling it?
Student Advisory Council. We've talked about it with that council a lot, and we've heard a lot of different opinions about it. I remember one thing you talked about actually was you had a teacher who would give like extra credit or like an incentive like to someone who would like willingly like give up their phone for like the however long the whole class period was. Yeah. So we've just heard of like things like that, or teachers who have like a little thing like you put your phone in like a little cubby and then like you can use it after you finish your assignment, and the teacher, you have to verify with the teacher that you've completed that assignment. But like there's new things we've heard. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, there are teachers who are using like really effective methods to make students voluntarily surrender phones. And then there are also teachers who just like command the room. If you use a phone in their presence, they will be quite reactionary to that. And so I mean, it just depends on individual teaching styles, and I don't know how much of that you can really put into a policy, because if we're trying to create a uniform standard, each teacher is going to enforce that standard differently.
I think I've thought a lot about this. I think initially my approach is what you guys are saying after talking to my own high schooler is like, well, no, you know what, phones are just part of our lives and we have to figure out how to manage them. But before this was even on the agenda, I did listen to A Hidden Brain with John Haidt. And I'm like, okay. It was like Escaping the Matrix was the episode. I'm like, I think I need to rethink this. And then I listened to the link, the other podcast link for this agenda item. What I'm thinking, I think outside of just enforcing, I think a policy maybe is trying to indicate the kind of learning environments we want as a school district. And I think it's getting increasingly difficult to ignore the fact that having a phone even on you is just distracting. I mean, if I think about it, it's distracting to me. Like, I'm getting ready for board meeting, my phone's close, I'll check. I mean, I just am now so aware of how often I want to reach for it. I don't even know how we can solve that. I'm just sharing my thoughts, I guess. But I do wonder if we want environments where kids are learning how to learn distraction free. Like, do we need to move to a unified position on cell phones? Yeah.
I tend to agree. I haven't listened to those, but I need to. Those podcasts. I tend to agree with that. But I do think we need to be looking at different types of policies for different levels, like elementary versus middle school versus high school. Those are all unique. So I think whatever the universal cell phone policy is, we need to empower the different levels of schools to be able to have, like in elementary school, I think we can be pretty strong, and then middle school, still pretty strong, but maybe a little not as strong. But in high school, we need to really be looking at that. But I do think that, and I think when we're couching it in terms of what is the kind of learning environment, I think that's a better way to do it than that we want to take away people's freedoms. Because I'm not interested in doing that. I'm not interested in taking away people's freedoms. But I am interested in helping our students understand and learn, because I know there's the argument, and I agree with it, that when they get to college, they're gonna be able to have their phones. I completely agree with that, but maybe in high school, we do need to help them understand how it's appropriate to use devices in that learning environment.
I asked my daughter, I said, so tell me about your different classes, like where it's enforced, and she said, my math class, he has a thing where you just go put it in.
Yeah.
And she's like, it's awesome because I get extra credit. And
really
so
is awesome.
it enforces, it's positive enforcement. And then I asked her, and she said, you know, like in art class, she lets me use it when I'm just sitting there drawing. She's like, we don't have it the whole time. And then she said in one of her classes, she's like, I don't have time to use my phone during that class. So it just gets put away because the teacher's so good that they're engaged the whole time. And she says, if you're on your phone, you're gonna miss something and you don't have time to miss it. So it's creating that atmosphere of how do we want our teachers utilizing the time well, but also empowering kids to know how to use it well, because it's part of our everyday society. And so if we can get somewhere with the students, we give the students the choice to put it in as well. It empowers my daughter. Like it makes me feel like, okay, I'm okay giving you one of these.
Well, and I think as I'm like listening to these different experts talk about it, I think I'm increasingly thinking as the adults, what is our responsibility to our kids in knowing that, you know, this is something that's increasingly making it difficult for kids to pay attention, you know, and these other factors. And so, yeah, what is our role in helping?
I had a question too. I had an experience as a substitute teacher where the teacher let the kids listen to music while they were working on an assignment, which made me think, do we have any students where their IEP or 504 requires them or allows them to listen to music while they're doing assignments or something, but do they absolutely have to have their phone for that, or can the teacher just put music in the background to accommodate that, or that would be my question, is do they have to have their phone for that accommodation?
So you bring up a really good point, Terry, in that the problem with it is if the teacher has it in the background, then that actually might be distracting to me. So that's why having, you know, earbuds and allowing the student to choose the music and whatnot can be helpful. You're right, they don't necessarily need a phone to do that, and then that would be our requirement to provide that, you know, whatever it is. They could use their Chromebook, for example, and use Spotify, for example. The other thing that comes up a lot is that a lot of our students with diabetes use their phone to track their blood sugar levels, and they have to be, I will never forget the time when I got after a student for checking her blood sugar levels, and I was like, you are not supposed to have your phone. And she was like, I swear, look, it's my blood sugar, you know. And just being humiliated as the teacher saying, I can't believe I just called out like my best student, and she was on her phone for a good reason, right? So I do think there has to be enough in the policy that allows us, to your point, for that flexibility. But what kinds of ways can we be creative so that we're not just, you know, then everybody's going to write it into a 504 accommodation, right? That I need to have my phone and be able to check it every 15 minutes or something.
So I put out on social media just asking anyone who wanted to give me input, and I actually heard from more than 10 parents, which for me is a lot. I don't have a lot of social media presence, but I thought it was probably really one or two parents who blasted it out to their friends. I'm not going to take any credit for that, but it was. I will say at the start of this week that I kind of had. I even spoke with a couple of people here about my kind of view around. I would like to see this managed in the classroom, teachers to understand like what kind of environment is best for learning and what kind of things do they need to put into practice in their classrooms. But I also listened to the podcast that you're talking about, and then hearing from parents, and started researching and clicking on some of the links around some of the research. And I do actually believe that, I mean, the majority of the parents, 9 of the 10 of the parents were like, please, please let's figure out how to get phones out of school. And it's easy for me maybe to think, well, as the parent, just don't send the phone, but we all know that isn't really the world we're in. And it will still be messy because people have smartwatches, and I mean, this isn't an easy thing, but I do think the right thing to do is to come up with something that will support our teachers. I think we need as much input as possible. The one of the concerns I heard that I hadn't thought of also was around safety. A parent who said, I can see, like, I'm concerned about my students' safety at school, and I do feel like them having a phone actually supports student safety. So then I just thought this is a really nuanced conversation, but I do think it's best for students not to have their phones out in class unless there's an instructionally supportive or emotionally. Again, it will lead, I think, to more 504s, because I think there are a lot of students who manage anxiety and a few other things with some touch points and some tools on their phones, and I don't think we should take those away from students, but I do think it is a huge distraction to learning, and I think it would be great to find a way to say, I mean, I looked through some of the sample policies, and I liked what they were talking about around kind of first, second, and third offenses, and I think initially it would take some time away from our administrators walking down. But if we have a locker in a classroom where they put that thing and it's safe, and then the administrator's the only one who touches it, we don't have teachers carrying students' phones and potentially the risk associated with that. I would love to see us do something consistent to support the district.
One thing I want to bring up too is just like the fact of like noticing patterns in certain students that teachers should be aware of. Like if students are on their phone like a majority of the time, of course, then like they're gonna recognize a problem, right? But if like a student is just like pulling out their phone and answering a text maybe like once a class, and they're getting all their work done, and like they have good grades and they're keeping up with all their schoolwork, I don't think it should be that big of a problem. And like those students should be like, I think just focusing on the people who have a problem with it. I'm not saying like we should like, exclude anyone, but like, of course, there's like always a way to like manage that, I should say, because it's not always a problem with everyone. So.
Kind of related to that, I disagree a little bit. Something I found interesting that they were talking about in one of those podcasts was about how, and we as adults are the same way, right? Like, oh, there's a text I'm missing out on. There's this conversation, right? And really, can it wait an hour? Can it wait a couple hours? Yes, it can. But when we feel like we're missing out, then we want to be in on it. And so I do find, as I'm thinking about it, I think it was helpful to have a district-wide / school-wide, this is how we do it. Because if this teacher gives a really great incentive and they don't have their cell phones or whatever, they say you can't have your cell phone, another one is like, yeah, as long as you're being okay, then there's going to be some of those conversations happening through text, through chats, that then people in other classes are feeling restricted, like they're going to be resentful or they're going to sneak out their phone, or, those kinds of things. But if like school-wide, this is what we're doing, we're going to just focus. Those text conversations can wait till later. I mean, even if I think I'm just really quick answering a text, it's happened to me before, and then like, wait, what did she just say? I totally missed it, and now I'm lost in the conversation for the next 5 minutes, right? And how do we all learn, adults included, to be more focused on what's the most meaningful, most important thing right now? And I think that is something that we want to be doing in our schools, and supporting parents and the work they're trying to do with that with their students at home. We're creating an environment where we learn to focus when it's time, and then have breaks and be able to do those other things at other times as appropriate.
One thing that I know, there's one teacher at Timpview who has this philosophy that phones aren't going away, right? We need to learn how to manage them now, so that in the future you're not, as an adult, constantly checking your phone. You need to learn how to deal with that in a school setting, so that in a work setting it doesn't become a problem. So that's just another consideration. I would also like to say something about what Max said is, well, yes, there are certain students who can have occasional phone use. They'd be fine, it wouldn't impact their grade in class. We don't want to create an appearance of, well, that teacher has favorites, they're not enforcing the rule for them, but they are for this other student. And that's just, we don't want to create the appearance of a teacher's pet having the ability to flout with the rules. Like,
So one thing I also want to say to that is like it doesn't have to be like picking favorites or anything. Like say like a teacher like they have like say they have like 3 warnings and like a student pulls out their phone for the first time, and then the teacher says, oh hey, don't bring out your phone, and they say it the first time. If someone does it like more than 3 times, then they can like be then they can be like disciplined and taken away. Just saying like if it happens more often, yeah, that's basically what it's just. We can still like notice it about that student and like point it out to them, just not like if it happens more than once. Is that what I'm saying? Several times.
I will say I did write this quote down from the podcast that the big lie is that schools need to teach appropriate cell phone use, that's the school's responsibility, or that it's teachers' responsibility. We can think what we want about that, but it made me think.
I do think there's a difference between being the teachers of it and being part of the culture to help with it. Like as a parent myself, I try to teach my children about that, but I know they're behaving with their phones differently in class than I would like them to, and I would love for some support with that. And people say, oh, well, you as a parent can do that. I mean, we have certain parental controls on their phones and all sorts of things, but when it's okay to have their phones out in class and the teachers don't say anything, and again, they don't want to miss out on some of those conversations.
Right, so I guess that my point though, I guess would be then that's why a universal cell phone policy is important, right? Like that is, we're not always factoring in the nuance of, okay, but let's have the kids use their phones in class, or we teach them how to use, how to like, when they can use it in class, when they can't. But if there is just a more universal, we want classroom environments free of distractions. That makes sense. Which would then support parents who are trying to help their kids not be distracted by their phones at school.
So does this need to go to policy committee to talk about and come up with some ideas from here, or do we get some teachers? I'd love to get teachers and students in that conversation.
Do you want to like a subcommittee of, I'm just going to tell you, the more voices you get at the table, the harder it is to come up with a. So I think policy committee would probably need to give some direction about these are the things we're looking for in a policy, and then draft something, and then when you take it out, then you're taking it out to different groups to get feedback.
So today, it sounds like we want to have a policy. So what kind of direction do we want to give to the policy committee? What are we as board members looking for?
I mean,
in that
do you,
policy?
like, what does that look like? Is elementary no cell phones, middle school, like, what does this policy potentially look like in your mind? Because
Dixon as well. Right, how will we ever really enforce that, right? People not bringing their cell phones. We're not going to do that.
Are we also looking to empower teachers to be more aggressive in taking phones, or are we actually trying to stop phone use and we
Like
make
student
policy?
integrity, you're saying?
Or what? I'm asking, like, because a teacher can take away a phone in any classroom in the district now, right? Is that like?
that is not a district policy.
Okay, so it'd be school to school.
That is written nowhere in the policy.
Okay, so are we then looking to make that a district policy, or are we trying to create a system of, well, on your second violation, then you're referred to your principal or whatever, or should we leave that to the school level itself and then just empower the teachers to do what they want in their classroom?
I think that's something that we're going to need to discuss as we're discussing what the policy, the specifics about the policy. I think it's going to look different at different levels. But I also want to be very clear to any teachers who might be watching, we don't expect the teachers to now become, that's not your primary job, is to be the
Right.
cell phone police. And then that's part of our job on the policy committee and as a board is going to be, excuse me, how can we have common sense policies that can help create these learning environments that we want to have happen in the classroom without, there's going to have some infringement on what teachers are going to have to be doing something because they're the front lines, but I think that is going to be part of the more nuanced discussion. I don't think we can answer that here, but I do believe that should be part of the discussion is how do we make this not a huge burden on our teachers who are trying to teach?
I think a lot of that will come out with the way we roll it out. Communication, talking with our parents, talking with our students, with our faculty and such about the why. And we're working towards this learning environment for you to get the skills and the learning that you want to have, right? Like this is not a punitive, as someone said earlier, it's like to help. And how do we work together on that? And I think the more people understand the why behind something, they might, if it's hard to change, then they're more likely to go with it and work with us.
My question is more to students. If it was every teacher did it the same way, would it make it easier for you? Like if every teacher had the little cubbies and it was just an expectation, I walk in the door, I put it in, and I walk out. And then when the teaching, like let's say the first 7 minutes of class is done, and then you're allowed to go get your phone, would you be willing to do that if every class was expected to do that?
That has more merit, I think, than just saying no and then having like a tiered system of violations. Because I think that having that standard uniform way of doing it is probably better than having to memorize every teacher's personal preferences, and then you're also not being normalized. Well, I think that's like a reflex. Oh, text message, check my phone.
Yeah,
And yeah.
Right. And you know, those teachers are gonna do it in, different ways. But if you have a
If you have the uniform, that would probably be easier.
One thing I will also say to that is there's a lot of different types of like classes at the schools. Like, we've got art classes, we've got ceramics. People are making things with like, we've got welding and the woods and autos and stuff like that. And sometimes students do need their phones for things like that. But I will agree that that would be helpful with Will to have that certain thing. I'm just saying like they might need their phone or they want to use their phone at different times based on the type of class they're in.
Yeah, but I'm saying like if every class, that was just the expectations you come in, just kind of like some of you at Provo High, you come in and you have to your,
Right, yeah, we'll tag in.
your attendance now.
Tag in.
But if it's just part of it, you just put it in, and then when the teacher gives directive, you can go get your phone now, then you're okay with that.
No, yeah, I think that'd be good.
One thing, so with the one teacher who does do the system, and it works really great for him, he actually does allow you, if you have Bluetooth headphones, to listen to music while he's teaching. It's just as long as your phone is not around, as long as you're paying attention, you don't have your phone, then he's fine with it.
I did look over the link that had different, I'm trying to find it, that had different schools' policies, and I thought some of them were really great. Like, I think we can obviously look at some of those, and it was different for different levels of the school, whichever level they were on, and I think those would be good ones for us to look at. I do think we're gonna need a lot of input from teachers, students, and parents on this because someone's gonna be unhappy with it.
Well, I think goes though back to what Wendy was saying. We can get a lot of input, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to continue to be very mixed, and we're going to have to make a decision about how, as in some ways, like we used the word stewards earlier, like of resources in our schools, like we're going to have to I think it's gonna be a hard decision either way. I think we're gonna continue to get mixed messages.
Let me clarify, I mean,
Okay.
once we have some kind of base policy,
see.
and
Okay.
then, just like we do with our other
I
policies,
see,
I
I
guess,
see.
so I guess it's not any different.
thought you meant-
We just need to make sure that we are putting that out there, and I think this will be one of the policies we get a lot of feedback on, but I agree, if we just put it out there now when we don't really have an idea, it's going to not be good.
Got
But
it,
if we
okay.
can have some kind of base policy, this is what we're thinking, and then get some feedback, and I found, being on the policy committee, I found that when we do that and we get feedback, sometimes we can take it and run with it, and other times we can't, but at least I think
Gives
about
us
it,
a
right? They
starting
bring it up,
point.
like, I didn't think about that. Then we discuss it as a policy committee, and we realize, okay, well, this is how we can take care of that, or this is something we can't take care of, but I agree that there needs to be something that we're putting out before we're asking for feedback, but we need some kind of base policy before.
Yeah.
So, I'm wondering if perhaps there might be a way to address this. We did this with the inclusive learning environments policy, where we brought in a group of, I think it was 8 or 12 teachers. And we brought them kind of a couple of samples and kind of talked through some things, and then just had them vet. I wonder if we need I don't know if that would be helpful. Because they're the bottom line is they're the ones that are going to be, they and the principals, the other group that needs to be involved with this are administrators, because to be quite honest, those are the two groups that are going to be the most impacted day in and day out. Yeah, the student's going to be impacted in terms of whether or not they have access to it, but the enforcement of it is going to become a big deal.
Yeah,
I think a small committee like that, right? Sorry.
Kay, can I make this discussion even more exciting? So in some of the resources we were given, there was some experts who were suggesting that maybe cell phone bans should be, I shouldn't call them that, but no use of cell phones during the entire school day, including breaks between classes and lunchtime, so that people interact with one another instead of, is it called phubbing, where you phone snubbing because you're busy and you're not paying attention to other people, right? So, thoughts on that and appetite for that? Max
So,
hand went up fast.
yeah,
All right.
one thing I read, I was reading through one of the policies on one from another high school in Utah. It was from Cottonwood High School, and it said, phones must be traded for a hall pass if student needs to leave the classroom. And I really like that, because I think, a lot of the times when students do take a hall pass, that's, of course that's just an excuse to get on their phone or to go somewhere else and just, hang out, or sometimes even just leave the class altogether, because, we've had students just steal hall passes and just never come back that day. So, and if they don't have their phone on them, of course they're not going to leave, so I think that something like that could be pretty beneficial too.
They really have to go to the bathroom.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that is a standard at TIFU, or at least for teachers who are enforcing phone policies. It is pretty standard that you have to turn in your phone to be able to leave the classroom. But to your point, Jennifer, about just cold turkey, no phones.
I'm not saying I'm on board with it, it's just a question.
I think that kind of brings up what Melanie was talking about earlier, where it gets easier to deal with it if there's just no temptation, distraction at all. I'm not saying I endorse no phones whatsoever.
Senior.
But I think it does become, if we are trying to put together this multifaceted, well, these are the permissible times when you may use a phone, right? At some point, that's just counterproductive, where it might just be more effective to do a complete, I don't want that, but it might be more effective to our goals. Yeah. Just, as long as you start this after May 20th,
like
go
you're
for
welcome.
it.
All right, Gina and then Meg.
One of the ones at Westlake STEM talks about which kind of goes with what you were just saying. You can't take videos, audio, or photographs unless explicit permission given by the teacher or student. At first I was like, wow, that's cool. But on the other hand, I've heard of stories where people take videos of other students and post them and pictures and well, and that's why I think maybe just no videos, pictures. because there's just too much misuse of that, but again, I'm not the one making the policy yet, so just something to think about.
I want Daryl to chime in, because he has a lot of opinions about this.
You might not want to hear it actually, but I think all these things we're talking about are really great ideas and good things, but as a teacher, I want to know the what if. So what if they do that, right? I mean, are we going to have enough, I don't know, for lack of a better term, we're going to have enough teeth in the policy that this group can support that when a teacher actually does enforce your policy, right? I think we need to pay really close attention to the what ifs, not only for the purpose of policy, but I also don't want the distraction of enforcing a cell phone policy to be more of a distraction than the actual cell phone in a classroom, if that makes sense what I'm trying to say. You're looking, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, so
I
it's
think what you're saying is no cell phones at all in the schools. Is that what I'm hearing you?
no. No? I'm just saying when we write this policy, if that's the road we're gonna go down, we need to make sure we're very clear on the what if so that teachers feel supported and know that you're gonna support them and that their administration is gonna support them. And once again, I don't want it to be more of a distraction than the actual cell phone. I don't want the policy and the enforcement of a policy to be more of a distraction than what the phone is. I'm probably speaking from a secondary lens, because I do know that a lot of teachers have taught appropriate cell phone use and do rely on them in their classes, and so yeah, just want to put that plug in for them.
Meg?
I'm trying to think how, I feel like I've already said too much, not really helpful things, but, to the point of like, there's like times you can use the phone or in the hallway, I think, looking at the resources and the research, I wonder, it's just a question, I don't know how I specifically feel about it, but is this something do you go all in? Or do you try to do it halfway and then you are spending lots of time on enforcing and whatnot? I mean, do we have any appetite to say, like I think with what the governor's saying and some other schools have done, this is a no cell phone school. And even in some of the examples, right, if parents need to get a hold of their kids, they have to call the office and they'll go get their kids immediately if it's an emergency. And I don't know what the answer is, but and obviously that would take a lot of buy-in from parents and families, because I do, on the other hand, I think parents will want schools to do better at restricting or helping kids with the cell phones, but we also want quick access to our kids too. And so something's got to give. I know that these are all those, I guess, questions I'm thinking, but I wonder, to get the results we want, to have distraction-free environments, is it most beneficial if we go all in? That's, like it, they said, the other quote was, sometimes we get a muddy mix of half-baked ideas because we kind of do a little bit and then we don't get the results that we want. I don't know. But my 15-year-old would not agree with me posing this question. So.
I was just
Go ahead,
ask
Lisa.
Jared for his perspective.
I think there'll always be a reason for an exception. For instance, there are a lot of translation services that are available through a phone now that are getting better and better. And if we take a hard stance, there's always room for some subjective approvals of exceptions, right? And though I agree that going all in sometimes makes it easier to have buy-in, as a former principal at all three levels, there will always be exceptions that should be considered, but I don't think we lead with that. But I think there has to be an understanding. There are other devices, Time Kettle and other things we can use to help with translation services, but for many students over the last few years,
They require a cell phone, by the way.
So there,
They use an app on the phone.
there'll always be a need, but sometimes people can hide behind the need and use it as a distraction. So I don't think I have a clear-cut answer for you, just some perspectives to consider.
Something that Gerald said I wanted to share my thoughts on, about the enforcement being a bigger distraction than the phone itself. I think when we do change with whatever policy, something might be often you do have to spend more time at the beginning with teaching about it, enforcing, but then we settle into this is who we are, this is what we do. I did find it interesting in the research that was shared with us about that, that it shows pretty clear mark from the time that smartphones came out, the increase in mental health concerns, depression, suicide, those things, and the decrease in academic performance. And so short term, is it a distraction maybe to enforce and not a distraction to let someone be on their phone, possibly. But long term, they are being distracted from their learning, and that is affecting a lot of things. And that's our most important job, is to educate them and to help our students learn. And so I do think we need to look at the long term, not just the short term effects of whatever our policy ends up being.
Just a couple of things, just from my own experience. I do think we need to make sure that we have parents on board with this, because to say we're not going to have cell phones and then the one time they can't get a hold of their kid and there really is an emergency and it takes too long, I think we're going to, then that's going to become the anecdote, right? That's going to be shared all the time. Well, this one time this happened, and that becomes problematic. When we were exploring this at high school or as a principal, we had legal counsel look at is it advisable for us to seize the phones of students, and they absolutely said no. It is a complete violation of privacy. It is a very expensive piece of equipment. You are completely liable for it, not the school district, but if the teacher takes it, the teacher themselves is liable for if it gets broken, if it gets damaged, if it gets stolen. And so I think I don't favor a policy that's going to put a teacher in a position where they are seizing a phone from a student. I think that creates a really negative relationship between a teacher and a student. And if someone's going to be pulling that phone away, it probably needs to be an administrator. It needs to be not done in a classroom. It needs to be in a private conference and pulling the kid out for a second and having a conversation. So I tend to favor more of a, like, everybody drops their phone in a cubby as they walk into the room. If there's some sort of extenuating circumstance, then the teacher knows what's going on with that particular student. But this seizing of phones, or now your parent has to come over and pick it up, but that also creates barriers, because if you have students, for example, whose parents don't get home from work until 10 p.m., they can't come and get that phone. And the other thing to realize is that students that come from a background of extreme poverty, if they get a phone, this is what they own. This is everything they have. They are not going to give it to you, and they're probably not going to give it up in some cases, because it is the way in which they're staying connected to lots of different things. So we would have to have in place some real ways in which we can, kind of to your point, Lisa, about kids may manage. Yes, social media creates anxiety, but there are ways in which kids are also managing their anxiety because they're checking in with their mom or a big sister every 20 minutes or something. We have all dealt with situations as administrators like this, and I just want to make sure that we have enough sensitivity to that we're recognizing what is reasonable and how do we help people manage that. And I think there are some strategies that can help us to not pit. I don't want to create a power struggle. As soon as a power struggle is created, we've lost. And so I want us to be really careful about what that might look like, and putting the teacher in that position of the power struggle is not a fair position to put a teacher in.
I keep thinking, an anecdotal experience I had with a child, they had to to go an extended period of time without a phone. And I was personally, as the parent, not happy that this was how it was going to be managed, because I thought, well, I want to be able to check in on them. I'm worried about her safety. Like, there were a series of reasons that I thought that was a poor ask. And also the child wasn't sure they wanted to be there in the first place. There were just so many things. So this is one anecdote, but I will say this. She will report now, even years later, that that may have been the happiest time of her life. And so we don't know exactly. I mean, it feels anxious to me to, if I leave my phone home and I go on an errand, I want to go back and get it before I run my errand. So I understand that it's almost like a little pacifier, you know, like, but it's actually more significant than that. I'm not trying to trivialize it, but I am saying, like, I think it is a really scary ask, but I also think it might be worth the experiment. I didn't feel this way even 5 days ago, but I do feel like it might be worth an experiment around giving us all permission to not check in on our kid. I mean, I'm going to acknowledge that Davey probably gets as many texts from me during the school day than he does from other people. It's terrible. I'm like, oh yeah, I got to remember to tell him that. And I know he's in class. I know better than that, right? So I think all of us would need to learn other communication styles, and I don't think it's a full step backwards in any way in terms of dealing with technology or teaching people to be technology users. But I do think sometimes setting a standard around it's okay to have a space where our focus is on something else, you know, might be worth trying. And so I don't think there was, but I am. All right, any input? When do you feel good about the next steps?
Are we actually early on our schedule, you guys? Good job. Okay. Wonderful. Well, then we will move on to item number 5, our trust lands report summary for the 2022-23 year. With Jared and Devin.
All right. There are a couple of attachments that you have in the board docs, and Bonnie, if you could load the report summary, excuse me, the 2022-23 school report summary. All right. So
I closed it because I thought your computer was attached. I can put it there as well if you want.
So just for context, as a reminder, school community councils, groups of parents, and staff members work with building principals to establish plans every year. Many of you participate on those trust land plans and the development of those plans. Every year, those plans are submitted to the state after approval from the local council and then from the Board of Education. And then every year, principals are required to submit a report. What you have in front of you is a summary of the goals and the principals report on their efforts to meet those goals, the measures of those goals for the 22-23 school year. Again, if you were to scroll through them, beginning with Emil Earhart, you could see their goal was related to Acadians' reading scores, their end-of-year data, and then the principal's response from that. And then you see they had a second goal related to mathematics, and the principal's response to that goal. This document includes this similar report from every school. The elementaries are listed first, and the secondaries are listed towards the end of this document. You'll see that there's a mix of some schools did not meet their goals, however they made progress towards certain elements of those goals. A few schools were able to meet all of their goals. You'll see there's a wide range of extremes in their goal setting, meaning some wanted a 3 to 5% improvement, others wanted a 15 to 25% improvement. And so their reports back, though, demonstrate growth towards those goals, and they were required to report these back to their individual school community councils. And again, these reports are submitted in the fall of the following school year. So this data is for the 22-23 school year, and our principals will once again in the fall be required to submit an annual report for the 23-24 school year.
So, Jared, just as clarification, I thought that they waited until the state certified that year-end data from the year prior, so that doesn't come till November. So when I looked at the state site, these reports are actually due in January.
In the spring, yeah. Excuse me.
Okay, so
Thank you for
January,
that correction.
but they're already starting to look at that when that state data comes out, right?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So you have a summary of each school, and are there any questions from board members about these reports on, from each individual principal? I know Devon's prepared some financial information related to the 22-23 school year that she'll share as well.
They seem so varied, like the way it's formatted. Is that really USDE's fault, or?
Yeah, this is really it's each school has the ability to write it.
The principals fill it out into the website, right?
They do.
And so, I don't know. It just.
Yeah, there's definitely differences in each goals. You're going to see some. If you were to look at Spring Creek or Edgemont and Lakeview, there's many more details related to each of their goals, and there are a few schools that are very simplified. And that's really dependent upon the school community council and the direction that they land on, what types of goals they want to work on. Principals will make proposals, as you're aware, and they'll work with their council chair and other members to refine those goals. And then the principal goes and enters them into the portal, and is required to report back to the council members. And so the reason there's such variability is each school community council is different and what they ask the principal to pursue with those resources.
I actually am a big fan of the Trust Funds program in general, but also of having school improvement plans and a set of goals that are actionable, and then a way you're going to measure that data, and then that piece that this is of reporting out that data, and then telling that story. Because often when we just tell these stories, right, we see something that's working, or maybe something that isn't working, and then we can dive in and look at, well, you know, we tried this and actually we didn't get where we wanted to go. We got a little bit there, but I'm grateful for people putting time into this. I know that scrolling quickly through this doesn't do it a lot of service for how much time goes into all of this. I guess I would like to say, in terms of the process, I would love it if the principal and student and community council, like, if this report were also maybe given to, like, maybe to assistant superintendents or someone who can sit down with them and have a follow-up conversation, and then given to the community. I know that our school improvement plans are linked on our website, but I think it would be worth pursuing to also give a report on our school website of how we did, because that level of accountability I actually think would support all of, like, progress in the process. Also, sometimes I know these kinds of things can be hurried because we just need to submit it. We have so many jobs, but this is such an important piece to me that I really value, like, making sure that we're saying what we mean to say here, and that it actually is reflecting the work that we're doing. And so I guess I would put a plug in for maybe some kind of, like, maybe we get this information or you get this information and you can sit with them and look. And as I look through these, I can see, you know, so many stories to celebrate and stories of growth and good questions that could come from that. And I guess I would love to talk more at some point about the process of how we use this, and also how we help our principals and support them, and how they can communicate this out to their communities.
Recently, our principals have had time to work on their school improvement plans for next year, and great emphasis has been to align the work of the school community council and the trust lands plans to align with those school improvement plans.
I love that.
I think the format of that submission will likely, you'll see far more similarities in their proposals and the goals. Daryl and I can continue to work with them on their reports that they make at the end of the year, and perhaps trying to align the look of that. As you can see, there's very
Yeah, and I don't actually mind
differences.
the variation. I like that every school can do it how it works best for them, but some of our stories are maybe incomplete here, and also I know they don't get their end of year data in a way, right? If you set a goal to get somewhere by the end of the year, it sounds like from reading through these, is that right, that they don't have
following November.
Okay, so if they're actually trying to set their next set of goals informed by these goals, they might have to look at that middle of the
They're
year mark.
always a year behind with their
Because some of
data.
it, I noticed some of them did say, we're gonna look at our middle of the year mark. It's from our beginning of the year, because that way we actually can make our next plan adjusted based on how we did with that, so.
Well, just to provide a little more clarification, we wanted to go away from having schools do so many different plans. So what you'll see is all of the schools are going to be submitting their school improvement plan templates by April 1st, and you will be getting access to a copy of that where you can actually go in and ask questions and make comments on that. In that school improvement plan, it will have pieces of it where it will indicate this is also a trust lands goal. This is, and we're using trust lands money to help fund this. We're using TSSA money to fund this piece. We're using Title I funds to fund this, and we're using school discretionary money, or we're using our general funds to accomplish this, because a lot of it's just, sometimes it's just accomplished with your regular staff. You're not using supplemental funds to do that. And then there will be a link in there. In the past, we've only had our Title I schools do a needs assessment. Michelle Eldridge did a really good job of guiding all of the schools through a really thorough needs assessment that then helped them formulate or inform their action plan. So it asked for specific data on different student groups. So then by focusing, say, on strategies to support that student group, that becomes an action item that then supports the overall goal of improving proficiency or growth rates as a school, if you will. So you will see greater consistency across the board. So you'll be giving feedback, their supervisors will be giving feedback, and then there will be a point at which they can revise that. And then Michelle's actually going to take them through, because you get some data at the end of the year, so she'll take them through that to make any final adjustments to that plan in June. And we want them to see it as a living document, right? So, then if all of a sudden you do your beginning of the year data and you find out your kids are ahead or something, then you might want to be adjusting that goal somewhat. So.
I have a comment. So Lisa kind of said it, but I'm going to maybe be a little more direct. So there are a few in here where they say here was our goal, and when they answer what they did, they actually, for example, there's one where they said our growth goal is this, and then they just talk about, well, this is our number proficient, or vice versa, right? It doesn't quite match, and so if we can just work with them on clarity so that we can understand how, I think it's important to be clear. I mean, maybe we didn't meet our goal, and we need to know it instead of trying to say, well, it's okay to say these are the things we're celebrating as well, but we need to know what was your goal and where were you at on it. And some of these are great, and some of them lack some clarity on them.
We returned 2 of them to principals just yesterday to update. And so thank you for that feedback.
Okay, so in the other document, there's a summary of their balances, and
I'm getting there, sorry.
no, you're good. So on this, in fiscal year 20, back when COVID started, they took out the requirement for the 10% carryover restriction. So they were able to carry over more funding, because for about a year and a half, it was really hard to hire people, especially with the model that we were running. And so they started, this is the first year, fiscal year 24, that they are keeping track of that. So right now we have 5 schools that are over the 10%. 2 of them are by $500, and so it's a low enough amount that it's negligible, and they will be below it. You'll see eSchool. It shows that they are 382% over. That's because they had a large carryover from previous years, back when they had thousands of students instead of less than 100. So we were able to reallocate those funds to the secondary schools that.
We don't use it.
So there is.
Can you pull your thing off so this figure?
Oh, I see, yeah.
we're working a lot more closely with the schools this year to make sure that those balances are all below the 10%. So the fiscal year '24, we have plans for all of them that they will be below the 10%. So we started a little bit earlier this year, and then that e-school funding we were able to reallocate to the middle schools and the high schools. And this is, just for context, this is about $2 million a year for the schools. And it's allocated based on enrollment, and they're the ones that determine what that enrollment is. And so when they assign, like right now, you can go in and look at the FY25 allocations, and they don't change based on our October 1 counts. They use the year before account or the counts in order to allocate that.
Way to answer what happens if they go over.
They can sweep it, or they need to come up with a plan. So most of the time, I've never seen them sweep it. There's only a couple programs in the state that they've asked us for money back from. And
By sweep it, you mean the
the
state takes it?
state could take it, and reallocate it the next year in the trust lands budget. So, but most of the time, it's just, what's your plan to go below the 10%? And the notice, the ones that are just on the first notice, it's just kind of a, beware. On the second notice is when they start requiring a little bit more of a specific plan, and on the third notice is when we haven't had one of those, so I'm not sure what they do. Because we usually are really good about making sure that they're below their 10%.
If I remember right, the Slate Mountain and all those other schools, they don't participate, right?
Well, so they were allocated funding at the beginning of the year, but because of the unique nature of those schools, we had them reallocate it to all of the schools. So we took the money that was applied to Slate Mountain, and because they were not able to create a community council and have the same requirements as the schools, we have them marked as, and we'll have to do it every year, that it's not one that applies and we'll reallocate it every year.
Any other questions? All right, great, thank you. We'll move on to item number 6, Independence High School Land Trust Amendment.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, kind of what we just talked about. Independence High School plan to use their excess money, land trust money, for salaries and benefits for employees. That was covered by other funds. What they want to make an amendment to their plan and use that excess money for Chromebox computers for their school over there. They want to just update a lab, and that Chromebox basically is just a Chromebook that is more like a desktop.
I had a question, like, I don't know, maybe someone who's on capital facilities,
Can I use the microphone too?
if someone's on capital facilities can answer this question, what's the regular replacement cycle of these labs or these particular computers?
They're usually on the computer replacement is 4 years, generally, depending on the level that it's used. But like CTE labs are generally 4 years. Chromebooks are generally 3 to 4 years.
So I don't know how old these particular computers are, but when we went to the listening tour, that was one of the complaints that the independence teachers had, was that they're not getting that replacement cycle. Their replacement cycle is usually longer than everybody else's.
So, and the labs that they have in the schools quite often are funded by the schools themselves, so the school is responsible for that replacement cycle. Chad manages all the replacement cycles of all the Chromebooks that are shipped out to students. The labs that are the extra computers that they have, the classroom sets, and then the teacher computers as well. And so when, like CTE, they will set aside
a school board member, I was trying to figure out trust lands, land trusts, did all the different things. And, is there a difference on number 5, it says trust lands report summary, and on number 6, it says IHS capital land trusted amendments. I'm just worried that we're confusing anyone who might be looking at it. Is there a standard way to refer to those that we can do, or are they just different?
They're the same.
Oh,
Land
I just,
trust and trust lands.
that's what I thought. I don't know.
I believe land trust is the correct way to say it, but we
The
most of the
actual
time say
website is School
School
Land
Land
Trust.
School land, okay. If, I don't, just a request, cause I looked at them like, are these, these have gotta be the same thing. But if we refer to them in the same way, it might be easier for everybody to understand.
Is that wordsmithing?
I love some good wordsmithing sometimes.
All right, and then I assume since it's coming to us, it's already been vetted, but I just want to make sure, the money used from the land trust funds have to go to academic goals. But because this is related to their academic goals, it's okay that it's being spent on technology.
A lot of, prior to, I think, a lot of school districts going to one-to-one for Chromebooks and stuff, we used a lot of land trust funds and TSSA money for technology because it gives you access. It allows the students to have access to visibility with their academics.
Right? Any other questions? We will be voting on this, in our business meeting later too. All right. We will move on to item number 7, our various large purchase requests internally to WA.
And this is just 2 large, we were gonna do 3, but we are actually only doing 2. The first one is the painting of Centennial. It was interesting in the picture you took of the colors, and
I wanted to add some color and
so this is for, they got some bids, that the other bid was about 5,000 higher than this one, this was the low bid. And it's 91,310, and the company comes in after school each day, paints, and then it dries by the morning, and they'll come in the next day and paint more, so they're not impacting the school day.
anybody have any questions about that?
Just to clarify, the budget for this, is this going to come from their,
So 75,000 is coming from their school capital, and then Kyle is covering the rest out of his painting budget for the year.
so it's not just for the public's.
It is not increasing the budget. They're using existing budgets.
Thank you.
I have a question. I thought I remembered that we were gonna have internal people for painting and things like that to save the cost of going out to contractors.
So on the smaller projects, that is true. If it was one classroom, then that would be the case. This is just a little bit of a bigger project.
Too big for internal.
Correct.
Okay.
At least for the time frame during the day that they were looking at, so. Thank you.
Alright.
And then the second one is for our annual replacement of Chromebooks. They did an RFP, and our one that we've been using, our vendor that we've been using for the last few years is DHE. And that again came in as the low price, so it is for $1,006,200. That will replace 3,600 Chromebooks for the year, which is our typical replacement amount that we do each. And this is also already in the budget. 3,600.
I wanted to ask, Nick brought up a point about some of our large purchase requests and, like how we know the impact or the real need. What happens with the older Chromebooks that are being updated?
So many of the Chromebooks that they are replaced, so they have some in there down at the tech building that they can check out if somebody's lost it. Or they have damage, they'll check one out while they fix the Chromebook. These ones that they're replacing, they'll bring in 3,600. They will replace the ones that have been there an extra year longer than what that replacement cycle is.
same, Chad.
So, they will utilize those for loaners, for labs that they may have for like our wellness. They'll bring in Chromebooks in order for employees to be able to use those. So,
Do we have Chromebooks that sit unused, like carts of Chromebooks in classrooms? Okay.
are you really storing 3,600? So the 3,600,
That's part of replacement cycle. Okay.
So incoming freshmen get a new computer. We're usually replacing an elementary school or 2 or 3, depending on what's happening that summer. So the 3,600 go to replace ones that are already in use. And we take those, and a lot of them get broken. I mean, Chromebooks aren't built very well, so there's a lot that are dead when we're done with them. We keep quite a few just in case. I mean, like the attendance system at Provo High is a good example. We use several over there. So Jacob hangs on to several hundred, but we also have several like labs at the schools for loaners. So when the kids break them, we have loaner labs that they go get one from, for example, or a student comes with one and forgets to bring one or doesn't charge it, or those types of things. So the schools have certain numbers of extras for those types of things, but the 3,600 are basically just replacements.
can we sell old ones at all? Or
We
surplus
do. We
them?
surplus those. We don't get a whole lot out of them, but we do surplus them. Yep.
That's right. And then to the comment about, who evaluates whether the technology is necessary. I mean, a lot of that is Chad and his team, evaluating, if things can be replaced. The touch screens remind me when we replaced all the screens with the smart TVs. What was the purpose?
To replace the screens. Well, in each classroom we have the AV in every classroom. So we have the voice lift systems, and we have a display, either a TV or an interactive panel we call them, or a projector. So every space has that. So when we replace those, they all have a life, and we basically try to push those things out as far as we can, let them live as long as they can, but when they start reaching end of life, we just start replacing them, and then we surplus those as well. So we have a pretty neat system in place for replacement cycles, and I'd love to share it with you if you ever want to see it. It's more fun than you'll want to have in a spreadsheet.
Awesome. I like spreadsheets. Also, do we circle back and sometimes say, like, hey, are you using this? How effective is it in your instruction? Or are our Chromebooks being utilized, as much as we thought we were going to need them when we started this? Or are there, like, spaces where we really don't use them? I guess that's the kind of thing I just want to make sure we're checking in and getting data on from our teachers.
Yeah, and we get that data from teachers, but we also have systems that go out and evaluate. So when I meet with the principals every year, we say, hey, here's the Chromebooks that haven't even been turned on in this amount of time. It's funny, usually, and when we meet with the principals, the ones that aren't being turned on are the ones that are in loaner labs, but all the rest are used at least within that year several times. So we do look at that, and we have other systems like Learn Platform that tells us what they're using on those Chromebooks and things like that. So there's quite a bit of data we gather to get that information.
All right, any other questions about either of these just requests? All right, we're gonna move on to item number 8, Google upgrade and
So I just wanted to inform you that you will probably get some comments from individuals about our upgrade that's going to be happening for Google. So, and I'll let Daryl and Chad also, and Jared, because they've spoken with principals to try to create a plan for this. So what is happening is we're taking all of the and did I screw this up, Chad?
Great.
Okay, good.
I'm here.
So they're taking all of the student accounts and we're rolling them into provo.edu accounts. So we don't have a student platform and a teacher platform, because what's happening right now is, in a lot of cases, for a teacher to be able to utilize a particular software or whatever, they're having to create their own student account. So teachers have 2 different accounts that they're utilizing, because most of our companies that we work with will only allow us to sync in with one platform. They won't allow us to use both. So part of the Google upgrade is to do that, and we've approved that purchase, but this means that we have to have the return of every single Chromebook in the district by May 22nd. And we have to, and every single Chromebook has to be personally touched by a tech person to switch this over. It also means that students are going to lose access to their student emails and their student Google Drives. So we're going to have to communicate out to parents and to students that they've got to upload that to either a personal Google account or they've got to download it somewhere. We can't transfer that over. So there will be some really specific instructions that will be coming to explain to them how to do that, and hopefully have teachers guide students through that. Am I saying anything wrong yet?
No, you're doing great.
Okay.
Keep going.
From there, it also means if teachers have stuff that's on that student account, they're going to have to, I think we can transfer those over for them, right? Is that what you said?
On the teacher accounts, I think we can. There's not as many teacher accounts in the student workspace. We have, most of them are in the other, but there are some.
It won't be too much, but the teacher stuff also has to be transferred over, right? So that they don't lose anything that they've created or their data. This also means that you're going to have a couple of days of school where there would be no Chromebooks available, and so this is going to create stress, obviously, for some teachers. And May 22nd, probably not so much for high school students, but it could create some stress for teachers, right? The next piece of this is it creates additional stress because we have summer school that's going on, and we can't run any of the summer school programs on the Chromebooks while we're switching that over. So they have to be on a physical lab to be able to do that. Am I right in understanding that? So I'm going to let Daryl and Chad talk about what they discovered as the solution to that one, because that was fun.
So basically the solution is we're going to try to have a list of those summer school students by May 10th. And Chad will have computers ready to roll for those students that are going to enroll in summer school. We will have, I'm assuming, some tech on standby for those walk-ins at summer school.
Yeah.
And be able to help them.
We'll accommodate that.
But our goal is to have the both of those students already, they'll be our priority on the switchover, so they'll be ready to go for the June summer school. And we met with secondary principals yesterday, and that was kind of the plan they came up with, and Chad is in agreement with that, I think, and we think we can pull it off.
Yep, I'm hoping we can. I mean, and I think because what we have to do is create all new accounts in the new domain for those students that we know are coming in. So it takes Google several days when we shut the one workspace down. We have to wait several days for it to fire back up, and then we start creating accounts. The other part is our apps like Canvas and Into Math and all the other. That's going to be quite the process. This will take us the entire summer to get this all back in alignment and functioning the way we want it to. But for summer school, we don't feel like it's going to be an issue. We think we'll be able to get all those ready and functioning by the time summer school starts. The other things the high school decided is they would push some of the tech components of summer school 1 week later. So it gives us just a little bit more time to help with us getting those Chromebooks and the accounts moved so we can get that functioning.
We're also trying to really, most districts are really trying to use what we call the Learn platform to really vet apps and make sure that we're not violating student privacy laws and whatnot. And Clint Smith does a really good job of vetting those, but we still have teachers that will utilize apps that aren't going through that Learn platform, and so we need to standardize that and create a protocol for how. I don't want to block anything from a teacher. We want to create a process by which this is how I request an app. This is who's going to vet that and make sure it's following the privacy piece. Teaching and learning will look at it to make sure it's aligning with our standards and that it really is supporting that, and then making sure that then it gets approved so that it's something that tech will support. Because what happens then is a teacher will reach out and put in a work order, and tech's like, I've never even heard of this app. I don't even know what's happening here. And so part of this will allow us to make sure that that's streamlined and we can provide better support with that and be really transparent with our community about what's actually being utilized in our classrooms, so they can go onto that Learn platform and see every single app, what the purpose of it is, how it's tied into instruction, and that will be a piece of it. Did you want to say something about that, Darryl?
No, I'm just
You're waiting for
letting
me
you
to
finish,
to
but
stop.
no, you're great. I just wanted to add one thing. I know May 22nd might bring out a little angst for some people, but the problem is, and Chad, once again, jump in. Once we take these Chromebooks and we go to do the changeover, we lose all ability to filter those Chromebooks, and we cannot track them down. It will be as though if those students went in Best Buy and bought a Chromebook, and I shouldn't be saying this on here, but so by going by the 22nd, we're hoping administrators and teachers will really help us get them back. That's why we're stepping that up.
And Canvas is no longer accessible to a student after the 22nd.
Right, for a little while.
If there's 2 days left of school and they've got assignments to turn in, they'll need to be in before the 22nd.
Yeah, and the principals have helped set this date, so that's the plan. And as Jared said a minute ago, there'll be exceptions, and we'll work through some of those. But for middle school has the 22nd, then they have their field day, and then they're out of school, so it's not even they. And high schools, we know there might be, some coming in a little later, but the reason we've set the date as the 22nd is we really need to recapture as many of these Chromebooks as we can, or, yeah.
We don't want a bunch of Chromebooks out there that are not filtered and connected to us.
And typically in secondary, they ask PTA to help gather and sign in Chromebooks, et cetera. So the sooner PTAs are aware of that, and they can start sending out sign-up sheets, because believe it or not, parents already are planning those days and won't be available. And I do think it will take a lot of volunteers to help check those in.
That was what I was just gonna say, is what can we do to help to collect these?
I think for the
Go
most
door
part,
to door, Melanie.
I-
Do you have a Chromebook
So-
from Provo City School District?
Yeah, let's do that. But I think just messaging, communication, support, and just trying to get everyone on the same page. And as far as I know, principals are planning to kind of do the same plan as far as the actual collection piece. But I think just messaging and communication is going to be key. And I know Caleb and Chad have already been working on that. We were kind of emailing this morning about it. So.
Can I just add one thing?
Can we give an incentive?
I was just thinking about that. I'm like, what kind of treat or
That's-
something
I'm
could I
just like,
give to the kids?
You bring it in and we give you your choice of candy bar. I'm just
Oh,
throwing
that's
it.
good.
Remember Centennial students did say,
That's true. They did say.
Do
for
we
this
have a
one.
problem with students who don't turn in Chromebooks?
oh, yes.
We have a lot.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a lot. Yeah.
We lose about $50,000 a year on just repairs, missing cords, damaged Chromebooks. It's a lot. So, Devin had a suggestion, which is if you bring it in on the 22nd, we waive any fines if it's like damaged or you don't have a cord or something. What do you think about that?
You mean Chromebooks?
Devin's the money person. I don't
Okay.
know. I don't know what the trade-off would be on that.
As someone who has lost the
don't know.
Chromebook cord, I would say that would be nice.
As the parent of someone else who's lost the Chromebook cord.
There we go. We might have an
Ordered one on Amazon, so we would have it to turn in.
Might be good. So anyway, we just wanted you to be aware of it, because as we message this out, I'll loop you into that the messages are going out, but you're gonna have questions about it, and I just wanted to make sure that you knew why this was taking place. And what's happening is, the reason is so that we can go to a single platform, and we have way more storage that's available on that, and there's more security features that are available on that. And so right now we're reaching our maximum capacity on our storage, so there could be some new teachers that we would have to put over on the student platform anyway, because we don't have enough space for them. So that doesn't make any sense. It's just, it's really annoying to me that I have to download PDFs to share with Will and Max all the time, because they're not on the same Google thing. So any time we're trying to do that, then I have to open up the security significantly on a document, and it's just a lot better if it's all
But
in
you're
one.
gonna
So.
walk us through and hold the hands of content.
Yes.
All of
Parents,
us.
how
There'll be
to get
tutorials.
that
Yep.
drive.
Caleb, you guys will do a video
Okay.
for us?
Ooh.
Caleb needed
Sorry, I
another
can't direct
job.
you.
I think Daryl
You were
and Jared
asking. You
and
were
Doug
asking.
are gonna do a video.
How about a rap?
Oh.
Wrap. A Chromebook wrap.
We could probably pull that off, actually.
I think actually it would be pretty great. So anyway, I just wanted to make you aware of that because I do think it's going to create some stress for teachers, and I think some parents are going to be stressed out. Like, why are these being collected 2 days before school is out? Or are you in essence
They
saying
already
school
collect
is?
them too early.
Yes.
I've always thought that.
Okay,
so
so I think we just need to help our teachers make sure we're still making those last 2 days meaningful. You don't have to have a Chromebook to make learning meaningful. Lots of us taught before there were Chromebooks, and we made learning meaningful.
that was gonna be my question about, I think you kind of mentioned a little bit with the summer school. Like, we have teachers. It's okay if we don't have a Chromebook.
Yes.
Yet, so.
That, and a lot of them are moving to in-person instruction, which we were like, whoa, there's an idea.
In
That's
fact,
weird. Like
shout out to
weird.
Independence, they're
Yeah.
gonna go full face-to-face
Face-to-face.
instruction,
So
so they're not even gonna have Chromebooks this summer. They're gonna try that, so,
I love that.
to help us out.
I've heard parents lately saying more and more, let's get away from so much Chromebook use. Chad, you said you want say something?
Just full disclosure, so one of our biggest challenges is gonna be e-school. Like, that's something we're trying to work through right now because they do that all summer as well. So that's something we're trying to work through with them. But that's a hurdle we're working on. We'll update you as we get more information on that.
Does that affect those who are doing like an online class, but they don't need, like they have
Yeah.
their own computer at home, it still
Well,
affects it?
It may, it depends. I mean, if they're using Canvas or depending on how e-school's doing it, there's some things we need to work through. I think it's doable. We just gotta sit down and work through it. So we'll keep you updated.
Can do that. Okay. Anything else? All right. Now we will move on to item number 9, Camp Big Springs.
So I have all the people here to help us with this. So, Kyle, do you just want to explain what you found when you went up to Camp Big Springs?
Oh, my fifth grader's gonna be so sad.
Kyle, we're gonna use a microphone.
Yeah, so I'm gonna forward the email. We've got hard copy versions Joey can show you, but I've also got electronic copies of pictures we took when we were up there last week.
I can do it. If you'll forward it to me, I can.
Do you have them, Daryl? Yeah, you go ahead and just share them with everybody because it'll take you less time to find them, and I should probably be focused on actually talking.
Why don't you just take over the screen,
Daryl, you could
Daryl?
also present if you wanted.
So, yeah, Daryl will forward to you half a dozen or so images that Joey took a week ago up at camp.
She wants you to stand.
Oh, you're
Oh,
bringing me.
yeah.
Would you stand at the front, use that hand mic up there? We have people watching on YouTube, and I think it's better if they see who's talking. Up by Daryl, and then there's a hand mic up there on the table. Thank you, Kyle. Press and hold. Try again.
There we go. So we went up there, Steve Canfield, Joey and I, a week ago today. We took a side-by-side and a four-wheeler to see if we get up to camp and see what we could see. Long story short, Joey was able to get to the camp on the four-wheeler. Steve and I could not make it in the side-by-side. I probably shouldn't acknowledge this publicly, but we almost rolled it. We did not, though. Steve's a very good driver. The road in is still, as of a week ago, covered with 2 or 3 feet, Joey, of snow and ice. And camp, certain areas of camp have 3 or 4 feet of snow. You can see one of the pictures of the platforms on the girls' side shows you just how much snow is still on the platforms. There are 8 platforms, 4 boys, 4 girls. They sit across from each other, so the ones on the boys' side get a lot more sunlight, so that's why they're free of snow. The ones on the girls' side, as I understand it, are a lot more shadow. Most of the damage you see is from last winter, where we had more snow than we've had in a century. And this winter just compounded the problem, but there's pretty significant damage to pretty much every one of the platforms. You can see where some of the 4x4 braces underneath the platforms have actually just broken in half. One picture shows a plank that was actually flipped by, I think, the weight of snow, torn loose and flipped up into a tree adjacent to the platform. And even the things that aren't broken or cracked have warped or bowed underneath the snow load over the last 2 winters. So we think it's going to be 3 or 4 more weeks before we can get up there safely with any sort of real equipment, and actually start to tear the platforms apart and repair or replace whatever needs to be repaired or replaced. So the best thing might just be to maybe take some questions from you guys in terms of probably going to be mid to late April. We suspect that after going through each of the 8 platforms, probably going to need 4 to 6 guys up there for about a month, just in terms of hauling all the material and equipment up there, going through each platform thoroughly to make sure it's in good working order and it's safe for the kids. Some of them have handrails, like the picture you see there. Some don't, so we want to add handrails to the, Joey, there's 4 that don't have handrails.
Yeah, so all the 4 on the girls' side, basically don't have handrails.
Okay, so there's 4 that have handrails, 4 that don't. We want to add those just to make sure that nobody falls or rolls off one in their sleep and gets hurt. And it's hard to see, but there is one photo where you can see where these metal posts that are set in footings on which the platforms are built have actually shifted with the moisture and the snow load, so that they're no longer true. You know, they're listing to one side or the other. So some of these are going to have to be taken literally completely apart, new footings poured, and then entirely new platforms constructed. So yeah, it's probably going to take most of the month of May with a crew of 4, 5, or 6 people up there to get them ready. Yeah, I mean, this week wasn't awesome. We got rain down here, some snow, but probably up where that camp is located, a lot more snow. And next week looks super wet too, so we'll go up the week after spring break and check it again, or sometime in that week or 2 after spring break when we can safely get out there, check it again, and see how much progress we've made just getting the snow out of there. Another complicating factor is that after the snow is gone, you get mud, which isn't a whole lot better. So it really needs to not only melt, but then dry out a bit to get the kind of equipment we need to get up there, whether it's a flatbed trailer or a 1-ton pickup truck or a box truck, you know, whatever it is, a Bobcat. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Can you remind me when our first week at spring is scheduled to start?
It's the first full week.
Yeah, so Chad, we've got the week of Memorial Day is that week in between.
That's where they're setting up.
Yeah, so that's a week off between school and camp, and then camp starts that next week. So I think it's the 4th of June is that first Monday. So something like that. 3rd or 4th, yeah. Are there other questions? We figure time and materials, it's probably a $60,000 to $80,000 repair job, and that's if we don't run into anything unexpected when we get tearing things apart. Yeah, and honestly, money's always a concern because it's a finite resource, but we're also concerned about the impact it's going to have on the maintenance crew when we tie up half a dozen people for a month to get it right for the kids, because you know, May isn't our busiest month of the year. June and July are, because the schools are empty and you can pretty much do anything you need to do. But this could take all the way up until camp starts, meaning that first week of summer might be kind of partially lost to getting this ready, and certainly we're not going to get as much done in May as we might otherwise, because we're going to have, like I said, Joey and I figure at least 4 guys, maybe as many as 6, that go up pretty much every day, tear it apart, inspect it, put it back together, replace whatever's busted, warped, broken. So,
Is the 60 to 80,000 part of our budget, or do we find someplace else for this? We have money for Big Springs, but most of it's tied up for teachers. So it could come out of the capital budget and, you know, out of the reserve.
just so you know, we looked at 3 different options for getting a sleeping area put back in place for the kids. One is to repair and replace the existing structures with the same materials, which is basically just, 2 by 12 by 12 planks and 4 by 4 posts and bracing, putting in the handrails. Another thing would be to use a manufactured, engineered synthetic product like Trex decking, which increases the cost 4 or 5 times, but has like a 20-year, 25-year warranty, and is a lot sturdier and more resistant to the elements. I'm not sure anything would have held up to what we experienced last winter, but that's an option. And the third option we looked at is just ripping everything out, leveling a space and just putting in, maybe moving the platforms to a more level slope, a less heavily graded slope, and just pouring concrete pads up there, which we could do with a portable concrete mixer, and my guys can form it and finish it. But the concrete would cost, we estimate it would cost about the same amount of money as replacing what's there, repairing what's there, but would have the benefit of being hopefully much more durable under the conditions. This, Joey, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys go up every year to repair
Yeah, pretty
stuff.
much every year we're up there, like 3 times usually for fall, so finishing stuff.
After the winter, you have to check and repair things.
And
They used to enjoy work for the city, tear everything down and store it over the winter to prevent all the damage. But again, that's more labor intensive, and the storage facility that used to go in was destroyed in the winter of 22, 23. So it no longer exists, and the city has no plan to put it back. So we no longer have on-site storage.
And that was gonna be my question, is that completely moved, sorry, is that storage, kind of hangar that collapsed, is it gone and all the
Gone.
materials are gone?
Yeah, there's a pad still there that it sat on, but
Okay.
I talked to the city, they have no intention or no plan to replace the shed itself, and it's been demoed and removed from
It has.
the site, yeah.
So, Kyle, you say you've looked at those different options and that the concrete pad would be more sturdy and the same cost, but that's not what you presented to us today, so why did you not pick that one?
Well, I started with just kind of trying to explain what's there and what would take to repair or replace what's actually there. In many respects, it would be kind of 6s in terms of cost, but there are elements of this that are simpler because it's a known quantity, if you will. The footings, if they're sound, are already in. Any boards that haven't been damaged can be left in place, and we know the exact dimensions and materials we'd be using to put in concrete pads. We'd have to find either a more level spot to do it, which means moving, and then it's going to involve, regardless of where you put it, some excavation, putting it in an engineered fill, compaction, pouring the slabs. It's certainly an option. It's just a different option. It would involve, I think, some more variables that this doesn't involve, but would probably be a more durable solution long term.
one thing with the concrete too, it's more man hours by far. With the concrete, it's more man hours by far, a lot, because you gotta finish it, you gotta pour it, there's a lot more hours.
Yeah, and in order to do it, we would have to buy a portable concrete mixer, which we priced out today. It's about $3,000 to get one that could do the job. But then you have to, it mixes a bag at a time, and we're talking about 8 yards of concrete for each of these pads, right? So we're doing a 64-yard pour, which just so you can kind of wrap your head around it, that's the equivalent of 8 full-size cement trucks clear full of cement that you would be mixing one bag at a time. So when Joey talks about labor intensive, that's what he's talking about. So
it's not really an option.
What's that?
But, so given our time constraints, it's not actually an option.
Well, it's like a lot of things. You've heard me say this before, and I apologize. I'm not trying to be snarky or evasive. But we can do pretty much anything. It's really a matter of where we want to allocate resources, because manpower and money are fungible, right? So the more we spend here, the less we have to spend someplace else. But we could do it. We could get the concrete ready. We'd probably just have to take up a dozen guys for the month of May instead of just 4 or 5 or 6. The last thing I'll say, unless you have more questions, is if we repair or replace what's there, I think we need to have some sort of a plan to take this stuff down and store it each winter, as opposed to going up 2 and 3 times a year and pouring money down this hole, right? Because every year it's going to be damaged. This is not material that's meant to be left out in the weather ad infinitum, forever. So if we do this, we have to have some plan to disassemble and store at least some of it each winter, so we don't have so much damage. And I don't know if that entails us building a shed back on that pad that's up there so we can store it on site, or simply going up with a flatbed trailer every summer or fall when camp is done and taking it down and bringing it down here. But this doesn't seem like a viable option to just build it and wait for something to destroy it and then go and replace it. I mean, that's what we've been doing, so. Other questions?
Can I follow-up question on that, and maybe Chad knows the answer because he's been up there so many years. How many platforms do we normally replace every year?
We've roughly replaced one a year is what we've been doing. And for a lot of years, we just go up and fix the 4x4s and leave the 2x12s until they're completely gone. That's normally how we do it. And we just replace the 2x12s that are gone, or the 4x4s underneath. We just kind of piecemeal it together. And we've run this thing on a shoestring for a very long time. And maintenance has done a great job the last 2 or 3 years, but before that, it was just us. It was teachers and staff. It was me, Bill, Brett. We were the ones doing platform work before maintenance did it. But we just pieced it together. These guys do a way better job than we ever did, because it's what they do. So, I mean, I've appreciated everything maintenance has done for us. But yeah, that's the reality of it, is we just kind of pieced it together. What Kyle's talking about is getting something more long-term in place, which would be lovely, But
So this, you're having to fix all 8 is not normal?
No, not at all. No, like I said, normally, I think if we did one a year, if we left it the way that it is, and we replaced one a year, that'd be fine. We could do that.
But just for the public, we knew going in, if we moved forward with Camp Big Springs, we were gonna have to replace all of them. So this in essence isn't new information, just information from going up most recently. Like,
Yeah, this
we
is
knew
just
that
kind of an
we were gonna
update
have
to a
find-
known problem, right? Which is, here's
Yeah.
where we exist right now. We got a lot of work to do, and Mother Nature is
Yeah.
not yet cooperating, so. It's gonna be the month of May, and it's just really a matter of what you guys authorize us to drag up there and put in place. And we can do any of the 3 options I've laid out. Some are more costly, like the Trex decking, some more labor intensive, like the concrete. This is honestly, to me, we do this because it's simple and it's known, but what we've been doing, I don't think is the way to go forward. We either have to take things down and store them, get new materials, or just some other thing. Darryl even mentioned, maybe putting some sort of cover over the platforms to keep the snow loads and all the moisture directly off the wood. That would certainly lengthen the lifespan of the materials to a certain extent. So, yeah, whatever you guys decide if you'd like us to do, we'll do. But, yeah,
Hey,
Jennifer.
could you clarify for me, when you're saying you take stuff down, you would literally take the platforms apart?
Yeah, and store the wood.
You talked about labor intensive. How labor intensive is that, and is that a good use of our maintenance team?
Yeah, so Joey, what would you estimate it would take to take those 8 platforms apart?
When I was at the city, it would take about 2 or 3 weeks to do
2 to 3 weeks.
How many guys, Joey?
about 6.
Yeah, so it's maybe slightly easier than assembling them, especially if you're building something new, but it's still undoing a lot of bolts and
And then
stacking
you
a
have
lot
to
of lumber.
rebuild them.
And the only benefit there is that the lumber would probably last 10 years instead of a year or 2 if you got it out of the weather every winter.
Or if we did Trex, you're saying we wouldn't have to do any of that, that it's more
Yeah.
money up front.
It would certainly be a lot more durable since it's a synthetic material, so it's not going to rot, dry rot, and it's the way they build it, the substructure is much. You can't really tell with these, Joey, on 6 or 8 foot centers, which means when you see that sag, that's because the footings are too far apart and the snow load causes weight in between them to force the boards to warp. The Trex substructure is much more compact, so it doesn't allow the give that this construction we've currently got does. Plus, it's a man-made product, so you're not going to have a lot of the issues you have with a natural product like wood. But the trade-off there is, you know, it's 4 or 5 times more expensive.
So we're looking at like $250,000, but it might last for 10 to
Yeah,
20 years.
well, the other thing too is when you get untreated lumber, treated lumber handles the elements a little better, although it's far from perfect, but it's also much more expensive. The decking is actually engineered to be in the elements because this is what you put outside your home when you put a deck on your house. So it takes the sun, it takes the heat, it takes the moisture, it takes the cold, the snow, the rain, all that, because that's what it's engineered to do. Raw wood like this, when it's not alive and doesn't have bark covering it, does not hold up to the elements well at all. So unless we're going to stain it with something that would keep the moisture out or use pressure treated lumber, you're going to have problems every year if we don't take it down. So
So do we need to add this to our April business meeting?
I think you're going to need to decide, do you want to just have them replace it because we already have, I mean, I guess because it's more money than what we had originally planned, then that is going to be a large purchase request, right? But I think you also need to decide, do we want to have a more long-term investment in this and do a better material so that we don't have this situation continuing to happen, so.
Hearing this conversation about taking it apart and putting it back together, it kind of both want to go towards the concrete. I mean, that doesn't go up and down every year, but.
the other thing we can do is, and I hate this expression because it's a little misleading because this isn't really what they intended, but this idea of splitting the baby. We could repair what's up there for this year to make sure camp is ready to go the first week of June, and then over the summer, look at moving the platforms to a more level area, grading it, putting in concrete. And we'd have July, August, September, all the way until it got cold and snowy, you know, maybe even into October and November to do something for camp in 2025. And we could always take the lumber apart and use it for other applications. Like not like we would never use the lumber if we didn't use it on the platform. We could repurpose that after we took the platforms down. And maybe the simplest way to make sure we have camp this year and everyone's safe is to do that and then just repurpose the lumber, and then we can put the concrete pads in at a later time. It'd also be nice to have 3 or 4 months to do it instead of trying to rush to get it done just in May. Because again, when you work with concrete outdoors, you've got to worry about spall and other issues that are contingent on the weather. You know, you don't pour concrete when it's pouring rain. You're not going to do it when it's 20 degrees. And so we get some bad weather in May. It's going to make getting concrete installed for this year's camp much more difficult. But we could always do it after camp for next year, and then take the lumber out, and we'd be able to reuse it for other applications around the district over time. So some things to think about. Also, one last thing, the Trex decking, there are 4 different levels of quality. They give them names like good, better, best, and superior. The low end stuff is roughly 4 to 5 times more expensive than lumber. The high end stuff is like 10x. We can't do that. The difference is the warranty starts at like 15 or 20 years and goes all the way out to 35 years based on the level you purchase. So we'd be talking about $15,000 a platform for material, and that doesn't include fasteners or footings or that's just the decking and the bracing underneath it. So you're about, what is that, $120,000 worth of decking, then we'd do the install or have somebody come up and install it for us, and it'd be good for about 15 years if we took care of it. So give you some idea what the cost differential is.
So this is for the board. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. We went to the community and we decided that the community told us loudly and clearly that almost regardless of the cost, this was something we wanted to move forward with. Is this correct?
Question with that. Do we know how many students have enrolled for this coming summer? Over 300?
No, I think it's like, we're up to like 420 or something like that right now. I can get the exact numbers.
So is that, I mean, this is a lot of money, and if we're gonna do it, then let's move forward with it. I just need to make sure, I think we need to make sure that this is the directive that we got from the community, and that's the direction we wanna go. And if it is, then maybe we need to see some cost comparisons of Trex, of wood versus Trex versus all that, including the manual, versus cement. Because if we are going to make this investment, and if this is something that we're committed to long-term, then I think we need to be looking at a bigger expense longer term, in my opinion.
Yeah, 'cause I think where we left the discussion was we were gonna fix the platforms for this year and then kind of decide what Camp Big Screens would look like going forward. So are we moving that conversation sooner?
Well,
Thinking about what we need to do long term.
I think when we originally had that conversation, we were looking at a $20,000 to $25,000 cost to go in and fix it. And what we're discovering is it's going to be a lot more. So if we're going to invest that much, then is this then the time to do it, so we're not, redoing it again? So.
And if that's the case, is this something that, I know you're talking man hours, is this something we could have hired out so it could be done sooner, or
Well, the most honest answer is I don't know. The most likely response when we research it is gonna be finding somebody who's willing to do it at that exact moment you need it done. There's just labor shortages all throughout the trades. And to find a contractor who'll go up there in that 4-week window when the work will likely need to be done with enough guys to do it, it's a stretch. I'm not sure we could actually pull it off. I think we're gonna have to do it ourselves, whatever it is, to make sure that it gets done. Plus, the cost increases significantly when you hire it out. It's typically somewhere between 2 and 5 times more expensive when you pay somebody else to do it. Because you cover their business insurance, their overhead, all the materials, their overtime, their labor costs, all that's rolled in, so.
So it sounds like we will be talking about the skin at our April meeting and voting possibly on something. In the meantime, maybe get a little more information to help us make a good decision on that.
Yeah, can you get us some different numbers? And also, can you tally, really what a monetary amount is of the manpower that this is gonna cost, right? Because I do think that's an important consideration in the overall cost of what this is, to not say, well, you guys are just gonna go up there. I think we need to recognize how much work this is.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely put that together for you. Okay, any other questions or concerns I can address before I sit down?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and in a very rare moment, we are actually ahead of schedule. By a lot, wow, go us. However, we cannot move straight into our business meeting because we've noticed that publicly, and so we need to keep to that time at 3 o'clock. So, we'll take a motion to adjourn this meeting, and then we will begin our business meeting at 3 o'clock. So do I have a motion to adjourn this?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Motion made by Board Member Boyce. We are adjourned.
Your car off